is what the flying geese block is going to look like. I have used a variety of different colors for my flying geese pattern and a neutral for the background. I have gone ahead and also cut myself a piece of batting. My batting is at least a ½ inch to an inch bigger than the actual size of the design. I'm doing the 6x6 block design, so I'm using at least a 6.5 inch block by 6.5 inch block. There's my batting. I've cut my strip of cream color fabric. I have my small square and I have a variety of my triangles. I'm now ready to start stitching out the flying geese block. To stitch out this design, you're going to need to hoop up one layer of tearaway stabilizer. If this tearaway stabilizer is thin, you will need to hoop up at least 2 layers. I am using a medium weight tearaway stabilizer. I only need 1 layer for this design. This design is not a stitch intensive design and therefore it works very well with a tearaway medium weight stabilizer. We are now ready to start stitching out. I have stitched the first color onto my stabilizer. The design has many color stops in it. Those color stops are just there to take and make the machine stop between each section. I will be using white thread right throughout this entire design. I will be using the MSA 1100 temporary adhesive spray for my design. It's an absolutely fantastic spray and it is air dissolvable, leaving no residue on your fabrics or on your stabilizer, or machine for that matter. We are now going to add the batting to your design. Give your design a light spray of temporary adhesive and then place your batting. Place your batting over the design. Press it in place by hand. You're now ready to stitch the next section of the design. The batting tack down has been stitched. With a nice sharp pair of scissors, cut away the excess batting. I'm now going to go back to the machine and stitch out the next color stop. That is going to create a layout guide for your fabrics. I've just stitched out my fabric layout guide. As you can see, the machine has done a lot of stitching on the batting. I'm now going to go back to the machine and let it stitch out my first placement line. It will start in this bottom corner. It's going to stitch a line around this area. The machine has just finished stitching out this bottom corner square. I'm now going to give it a light spray of the temporary adhesive spray and add my fabric. When placing your fabric, make sure you have at least a 1/4 inch of fabric above the top of the square and on the side of the square and at least a 1/2 inch to the outside of the design. The 1/2 inch is going to go into your seam allowance and the 1/4 inch above this is going to be used to go into a small seam inside the actual quilted design. If you have a problem with eyeballing the placement, you can make a marking on the fabric just to help with the guiding of the fabric. Now we can go stitch out the next color stop. The tack down stitch has just been stitched. I'm now going to take my ruler and a pen and just check my measurements. I see I'm a little bit over my measurements. I'm going to quickly mark it and trim back the fabric. I always like to get my fabrics neatly measured up before I begin. This just helps with the placement for future pieces of fabric. I'm now going to go stitch out the next color stop. I've just stitched the placement line. With a ruler, take and measure the piece of fabric. In this case, it is 1 3/4 inches. I'm now going to take my cream fabric and cut 2 pieces of 1 3/4 inch of fabric. Remember, your measurements will change depending on the size of the design that you're using. I'm currently stitching out the 6 by 10 inch design. I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 pieces, one to go across here and one that will fit in at the bottom. So I will now need 2 1 3/4 inch pieces of fabric. With my fabric now cut, I'm ready to continue. Give your fabric a light spray with temporary adhesive. With right sides together, place your fabrics, one on top of the other, along the top line of material. We are now ready to stitch the next color stop. This will be the tack down. The tack down stitch has just been done. I'm now ready to flip the top piece of fabric over. I'm now ready to stitch the next placement line. It will come along over here. The placement line has just been stitched. Give it a quick light spray of temporary adhesive and place the next piece of cream fabric. Again, right sides together, matching the fabric edges, and hand press in place. Go ahead and stitch the next color stop. I've just stitched the tack down stitch. Flip that piece of fabric over and just gently press into place. We're now ready to stitch the next color stop. This is going to be a placement line and it will mark where the beginning of the triangle is going to go. My placement line has been stitched. Before I continue, I always like to measure off my seam allowance for inside the design. With your ruler and pen, mark off a 1/4 inch. Trim back the fabric along this line. Give the fabric a light spray of temporary adhesive. Pick out a color from your triangles that you have cut. In this case, I'm going to use a nice pink. Turn it over and you can place your triangle. For accuracy's sake, I like to fold my triangle in half. You want to get that center point. With the center point marked, I like to place it over there, the center point of the triangle in the center of the square that we've got. And then just open it out. Perfectly placed. Remember, fabrics must always be right sides together. Let's go stitch the next color stop. This will be the tack down. My tack down stitch has been done. Now to flip the fabric over. Your first flying geese triangle has been stitched in place. I'm now going to go back to the machine and let it stitch the next placement line. It will come across the top of this piece. My placement line has now been stitched. Once again, I'm going to measure for my fabric. I'm going to need at least 2 3/4 inch of fabric. Remember, your measurements might differ depending on the size of the design that you're going to be using. Go ahead and cut 2 strips of fabric in cream. Now that your fabrics are cut, we are ready to continue. Give a light spray of temporary adhesive. Place your cream fabric on top of your previous fabrics. Again, you want to place it along the edge of the fabric. Right sides of fabric must face each other. You can also just lightly flip the fabric back to see that it will definitely cover the stretch that's going to be stitched down. Now to go stitch out the next color stop. My tack down stitch has been stitched. Now I'm going to flip the fabric over. I'm now going to go and stitch the next color stop, which will be the placement for the next piece of fabric. It will come along this side. My placement line has now been stitched. I'm going to go ahead and add the next piece of fabric. Again, a light spray of temporary adhesive. My fabric, right sides to face each other, and I'm going to carefully place it along the edge of that fabric. And I'm ready to stitch the tack down for this piece. The tack down has now been done. Just flip that fabric over and just finger press in place. You're now ready to stitch the next color stop. This is going to be a placement line for the next triangle or flying geese piece. It will come across the top. My placement line has now been stitched. Before I add my piece of fabric, I'm going to measure my 1/4 inch seam allowance on the inside of the design. Trim back the fabric. You don't want bulk inside your design. Pick out a color for your next triangle. In this case, I'm going to use a lovely turquoise. Give a light spray of temporary adhesive. Fold your triangle in half so the right side is on the outside. I prefer to do it like this so I can mark the center of my triangle. It makes placement much easier. With the center marked, you can simply place that center along this point. Open up the triangle. You're now ready to stitch the tack down for this piece. My last flying geese triangle. Flip the fabric over and just press in place. Your block is actually done, but now the machine is going to stitch out a final tack down. It is going to go all around the block. This holds all the fabric in place and acts as a nice sewing guide for when you have to put the pieces together. And that's it. My block is done. This design requires 8 of these blocks. I'm going to go stitch out the other 7.